There are cracks on the world map that the naked eye cannot see. But if you listen closely, you will feel the quiet cracking sound that is gradually spreading. The world in 2025 is witnessing a silent wave of decline. Places that once rose strongly after the war, once praised for their potential and opportunities, now find themselves caught in a whirlwind of debt, inflation, instability, and despair. There, people no longer dream of a bright future. They only hope to survive another day. In this video, we will go through 10 countries that are falling into severe crises in 2025, where the crises are leaving open wounds that cannot heal. Stay tuned until the end, because the stories you are about to hear are not just wake-up calls, but could also be a mirror reflecting the very place you live in. Is the place you live in gradually getting closer to this list? As usual, this is not a pessimistic warning, but a perspective reflecting multiple sources to help the community better understand and prepare proactively. Are you ready to explore the first country? Let's start right now. The appearance of the United Kingdom at the top of the list might astonish you. How could a nation that once ruled over an empire where the sun never set now be classified among the countries gradually collapsing in 2025? The United Kingdom, a symbol of stability, a model welfare system, soft power, and democratic tradition, is facing a silent, prolonged, and more dangerous crisis than any political storm that has ever passed through its history. After the energy crisis, inflation has exploded, deeply affecting every kitchen. In 2023, food prices in the UK rose by more than 19%, the highest level in over 40 years. The Bank of England was forced to raise interest rates to 5.25%, pushing millions into a mortgage debt crisis. Many middle-class families are forced to sell their homes or take out high-interest loans to pay for heating during the winter. You think working poor is a distant issue. In England now, working full-time is still not enough to make a living. Trussell Trust, the largest food bank in the country, had to distribute over 3 million food parcels in just 1 year. This is an unimaginable number for a country considered one of the most powerful nations in the world. But what's even more frightening is that not only the homeless, but also full-time administrative staff and even middle-class people have to line up to receive those aid packages. The collapse doesn't necessarily have to come from war or a coup. It can start from a doctor's appointment being postponed for 6 months, a dinner of instant noodles in a warm coat because there wasn't enough money to turn on the heater, a letter from the bank notifying an interest rate hike, making you realize that the house you are living in no longer truly belongs to you. It's no longer an economic crisis. It is a fracture in trust, the very thing that has kept this country standing for centuries. And when even those who once believed in the system start quietly removing that trust, then it's not just a difficult phase. That is the beginning of a collapse. And you, when looking at a country that was once the center of global power, do you still see stability? Or have you started to notice the cracks silently widening? South Africa, a country that once led Africa with its developed industry, is now experiencing upheavals that worry the entire world. On paper, this is a democracy expected to become a model for the entire continent. But behind the glamour of the numbers, behind the political slogans and economic reports, lies the daily lives of millions of people struggling between darkness and fragile hope.
After years of corruption and mismanagement and poor investment, everything that once could have been a great state just now seems to have slipped from South Africa's grasp.
After years of corruption and mismanagement and poor investment, everything that once could have been a great state just now seems to have slipped from South Africa's grasp. 0-2 to 0-10. After years caught in the vortex of corruption, mismanagement, and misguided investments, what could have turned this place into a regional powerhouse is now plummeting into the abyss. Nearly 33% of the population is unemployed, including over 60% of young people. No opportunities, no income, no hope. Meanwhile, The super-rich continue to dominate a large portion of the national wealth, creating what is considered the largest wealth gap in the world. The power outages, also known as load shedding, have become a part of daily life. There are areas where people live without electricity for up to 10 hours a day. Businesses cease operations. Schools had to close early. The hospital uses gasoline generators to maintain emergency equipment. Behind that is a national electricity system deteriorating severely, with allegations of corruption within the state-owned electricity company eroding public trust. And then, as an inevitable reaction, protests spread. From Johannesburg to Cape Town, people are taking to the streets, not just because of the electricity bills, but because they are also trying to revive their own lives. No one expected this, and no one can say for sure what will happen next. But if South Africa, a country once admired for its courage and democratic aspirations, is on the brink of collapse, then it is no longer just a story about economics or politics. That is a wake-up call. How many other countries are also silently fracturing from within, which we have inadvertently overlooked the signs of? If a country once called the breadbasket of the continent can fall into poverty and hyperinflation, then what is truly protecting us from collapse? Zimbabwe was once a symbol of hope after independence, a country rich in land, with a favorable climate, developed agriculture, and a stable society enough to dream of a prosperous future. But all of that is now just a memory, fading behind the pages of worthless banknotes and the fields abandoned under the scorching sun. The story did not begin with the sound of gunfire, but with unrealistic policies. The land reform revolution was once hoped to be a correction of history, but it soon became the first crack in a disaster. Thousands of commercial farms were confiscated without compensation. The modern agricultural machines have stopped operating. The land was handed over to those lacking experience, lacking qualifications, lacking everything, except for connections to power. And so, within just a few years, a country that once exported food had to receive aid to feed its own people. But that was just the beginning. Hyperinflation reached 79.6 billion%. The banknotes worth hundreds of trillions of Zimbabwean dollars are now only kept as symbols of the crisis. The people here even have to use wheelbarrows to carry money to the market, just to exchange it for a loaf of bread to tide them over. Those who once taught have left the profession because the salary is not enough to live on. The hospitals lack medicine, doctors, and even hope. As for the young people, they leave the country every day, heading to South Africa or anywhere that can offer them a chance to survive and hope for a future ahead. Since 2017, a new government has taken over, bringing promises of reform and restoring trust. But in a system where trust has been eroded over decades, every effort is like walking on quicksand. Corruption has not ended. Foreign investment remains cautious. The economy still relies on basic extraction industries, while the majority of the population struggles daily to earn a full meal. Zimbabwe did not collapse overnight, but it is falling apart bit by bit. If a country with all the elements for success can fall into crisis just because of management mistakes and internal erosion, then is there anything truly enduring in this world? Imagine a country where the sound of temple bells once resonated in the peaceful morning, now drowned out by the sound of gunfire, where dreams of the freedom to vote, the freedom to learn, the freedom to live, are now swept away like dust under the wheels of an unstoppable machine of power. That is Myanmar, a country where time seems to be frozen in an endless nightmare with no way out. The political upheavals here have turned into a long slide, plunging the entire nation into darkness. More than 2 years later, Myanmar is no longer a developing country, but a fractured body, with many territories gradually becoming deficient, while the central government is losing control and the people's trust. The scariest thing is not the war itself, but getting used to it. Children born amidst gunfire no longer know what the back-to-school season is like. Adults do not dream of the future. They only calculate how to survive another day. All normal orders, economic, medical, educational, have collapsed. The markets have fallen silent. Money has lost its value. And the people's hearts, already drained by disease and poverty, are now even more parched by helplessness. When will Myanmar regain control over itself? And if no one speaks up, will the memory of Myanmar become the only thing left in the past? Since 2023, Sudan has fallen into a conflict between the National Army and the domestic paramilitary RSF. But this is not just a conflict between two factions. It is the disintegration of the government of a country that was already fragile. Smoke rises from the capital Khartoum, not because of festivals or dazzling fireworks. The people, from civil servants to farmers, from doctors to students, have all become refugees in the very land where they were born. There are no clear front lines, only residential areas that are no longer intact, hospitals that cannot operate, and groups of people walking hundreds of kilometers to find a place without gunfire. More than 9 million people have been forced to leave their homes. Rice has become a luxury item. Clean water is a fantasy. And while the cities are being destroyed one neighborhood at a time, the international community is still fumbling through endless meetings. Sudan's economy, already deep in inflation and food shortages, now resembles a boat with a broken bottom. Many banks are closing. Schools are silent. The market is in ruins. The people depend on international aid, but supply routes have been cut off due to the conflict. Sudan is not just losing control, it is losing its ability to survive day by day. If a nation is burning from within, and no one outside is willing to extinguish that fire, what will remain but ashes and memories? But even amidst the ashes, life still finds a way to rise. Some field hospitals have been set up by groups of volunteer doctors. Ordinary people are quietly opening their homes to strangers seeking refuge. In the places that seem most hopeless, there are still hands reaching out. And even though they are fragile, those hands still hold tightly to each other, preserving a part of humanity amidst the brutality. No one can change the past, but hope can still light the way back. Not returning to buildings, but returning to a simple thing: the right to live as a human being. Bangladesh, one of the most populous countries in the world, is at a dangerous crossroads. From afar, this is the story of a country once praised for its miraculous development, thanks to the garment and export industry. But up close, the reality is full of cracks, with fissures spreading beneath the glossy surface. Inflation skyrockets. The prices of essential food items, rice, cooking oil, eggs, milk, have skyrocketed to the point where poor workers have to choose between a meal and medicine. Foreign currency reserves are running low, forcing the government to borrow from the IMF and cut subsidies that were a lifeline for millions of people. The taka depreciates, businesses close down, and the line of unemployed people grows longer in front of the industrial zones that used to operate around the clock. The textile industry, the backbone of Bangladesh's economy, is also shaking as international orders decline. Factories lay off workers en masse, and female workers, who are the main labour force, are left with no way out. Meanwhile, the climate crisis continues to inundate rural areas with floods and soil erosion, leaving millions homeless and without livelihoods. However, amidst countless difficulties, the people of Bangladesh are still holding hands to avoid being knocked down. Community organisations have begun to form networks to support food, healthcare, and vocational training for the unemployed. Initiatives on solar energy, sustainable farming, and digital skills education are being implemented in many rural areas, providing new opportunities for those who were once left behind. Although the road ahead is still fraught with challenges, what sets Bangladesh apart is its indomitable spirit. That is not just a lesson for a single nation, but a reminder that from the midst of adversity, hope can sprout like a seedling after a flood. And where there is still faith, there is still a path to move forward. There are places where the collapse does not happen in an instant. It is quiet, smouldering, like a dilapidated roof that rots a little more with each rainy season. Haiti is such a place. A beautiful island nation that once ignited hope for independence movements around the world is now engulfed in chaos. Haiti today is a country without a center, where gangs control up to 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince. The once bustling streets have now become places where no one dares to step foot. Even the residents have to ask for pass permits from the criminal groups to pass through their own neighborhood. Markets are occupied and supply chains are disrupted by conflict. The lifeboats from international aid shipments sometimes cannot reach the besieged area. More than 500,000 people have left their homes. The economy of Haiti has collapsed in every aspect. The gourd is depreciating. The banking system is nearly paralyzed. Inflation has pushed prices beyond the reach of the majority of people who already live below the poverty line. Meanwhile, the leadership crisis shows no signs of ending. Each passing day is a step back from stability, from development, from the future. But the most heartbreaking thing is not in the numbers or reports, but in the eyes of the Haitian people. No longer any resistance, no longer any aspirations. All that remains is the bitter silence of people who have grown accustomed to the world turning its back. So when a nation no longer has a refuge, no longer has a government to trust, no longer has safety to live, what will remain besides the gradually forgotten memories of a country that once bravely fought for freedom? The story you just watched is part of the bigger picture that I have tried to compile from various official sources, international reports, and accounts from the local people themselves. It's not just to report the news, but for us to reflect together. What causes a nation to gradually collapse? And is there a way to rise from the ashes? If you think this is a topic that needs more discussion, please share your perspective. Because sometimes, those seemingly small conversations can sow the seeds for bigger changes than we realize. Lebanon used to be the Switzerland of the Middle East, a financial, cultural, and tourist hub where the streets of Beirut shone under golden lights and people sipped coffee while classical music played from old bookstores. But today, those streets are gradually sinking into darkness due to daily power outages. The bank is closed. People cannot withdraw their own money. The Lebanese pound has lost over 90% of its value in just a few years. The monthly salary of the people here is now only enough to buy a tank of gas and a few loaves of bread. The financial crisis of 2019 has opened a chain of collapses with no end in sight. The banking system, once praised as the safest in the region, has now become a source of despair. People who have saved their entire lives cannot withdraw their money. The leaders are accusing each other, while the middle class, once the pride of Lebanon, now have to line up to receive international aid. In hospitals, doctors quit because their salaries are not enough to live on. Schools don't have operating funds. The anger that once spilled onto the streets during the protests of 2020 has now been replaced by resignation. Because when everything you once believed in crumbles before your eyes, what is there left to resist? In the darkness, there are still quiet sparks burning. Many Lebanese people have started to rebuild from their own communities. Small businesses are turning to solar energy to maintain operations without relying on the power grid. The small markets, community schools, mobile health clinics all serve as the lifeblood that prevents this country from completely collapsing. Although difficulties still remain, the resilient spirit of the Lebanese people is something that nothing can extinguish. Because there is one thing that money cannot measure, and that is resilience. And in Lebanon, that has never run out. Once one of the wealthiest countries in South America due to its vast oil reserves, Venezuela has now become a symbol of comprehensive economic decline in modern times. The people are not desperate due to a lack of resources, but because of a system that can no longer distribute them. In the supermarket, the shelves are empty, but outside, trash and homeless people lie scattered everywhere on the sidewalks. The once valuable Bolivar bills now lie scattered in the markets. No one wants to take them, as they can't even buy a decent meal anymore. Inflation in Venezuela once exceeded 1,000,000%. The local currency depreciated to the point where people had to carry bags of money just to buy a loaf of bread. Medicine, electricity, and clean water are gradually becoming increasingly luxurious. The crisis is not just economic, it is a crisis of trust. Millions of people have left the country. They walked across the border to Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, carrying with them the last remnants of hope. Venezuela has become one of the largest migrations in the world during peacetime. But what about those who stay? They live in neighborhoods without electricity, eat every other meal, and every day is a struggle for survival. Amid the throngs of people jostling in line for fuel right at the world's largest oil field, a bigger question arises. How can a nation collapse like this, while the world just stands by? And if a country with resources, manpower, and a history of fighting for independence like Venezuela can still fall to such depths, what guarantees that any other nation will not follow a similar path if cries for help are not heard soon? There are moments in history when a nation shines like magic, then flickers out like a candle running out of wax in a fierce wind. Sri Lanka is a vivid testament to that. A beautiful island, once a destination for international tourism, once praised as the remarkable post-war recovery story. But now, it is mired in crisis because of the very hands that once built it. In just a few years, Sri Lanka has fallen from a stable growth country into a state of bankruptcy, food shortages, depleted foreign reserves, and an inability to import fuel or medicine. The image of people queuing for hours under the scorching sun just to receive a can of oil or a few kilograms of rice is no longer an exception. It has become a daily routine. Every dollar in the government's hands has become a life or death decision. Should they buy fuel to keep the lights on, or medicine to save lives? The cause does not only stem from the pandemic or global tensions. It stems from reckless fiscal policies, massive foreign loans without a repayment strategy, and failed agricultural decisions that severely reduced food production. Especially, the sudden ban on chemical fertilizers in 2021 caused millions of farmers to struggle, leading to a sharp decline in rice production, forcing Sri Lanka, a once self-sufficient country, to rely on imports during its most severe economic crisis. Sri Lanka did not collapse due to a lack of potential, but because of a prolonged series of mistakes that were not corrected in time, until the people had to rise up, not because they wanted to, but because they had nothing left to lose. However, Sri Lanka is also finding ways to stand up. Although the road to recovery is still fraught with challenges, Sri Lanka has taken its first steps. IMF support programs have been implemented. The tourism sector is showing signs of recovery. Young people are returning to organic farming in a more sustainable way, and community initiatives are springing up everywhere to help each other overcome difficulties. Sri Lanka hasn't lost its light. It has just been temporarily obscured by fog. But the sun will shine again. We have just traversed the bleak journey of 10 countries rapidly descending in 2025. Places that once held hope, that once had the potential to rise. But then, step by step, they were submerged by corruption, injustice, inflation, and wrong decisions that no one dared to correct. From Venezuela with its currency becoming worthless, to Haiti, where the government exists only on paper, there is one common thread. The people who did not create the crisis are the ones who bear all the burden. But this is not just their story. That is a warning. It is a mirror reflecting what could happen to any country if small cracks are not mended, if the voices of the people are ignored for too long. Because no country is permanently safe, no democracy is immune to decay from within. And in a world full of upheaval, where just one mistake can trigger a chain of collapse, are we sure that the place we live will never be on that list? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Please note, the information in the video is compiled from public and reliable sources aimed at analysis and providing a reference perspective. The video is not intended to incite, criticize individuals, or provide financial legal advice. Viewers should consider additional information before making a decision.